What's the scariest thing you've seen in your or someone else's basement? I don't believe in ghosts, but I lived in a home with a few roommates who would claim the house was, indeed, haunted. New guy low man on totem pole got the basement, and I'll admit there was a weird energy to it. There was always a feeling of being watched. So I've got a ton of stories about that house, like the time we were partying in the living room, and like 10 people all heard something stomp up the basement stairs, slam open the basement door, and stomp angrily across the kitchen floor, but stop just before being visible. When we got our nut up to peek around the corner, the basement door had indeed been slammed open. But the best was me, alone, asleep in the basement. We all know that eyes on you feeling, and it was so strong I woke up, flat on my back, which is weird, because I'm a stomach side sleeper, and watched a face press through the wood floor above my face and stare at me. I finally just rolled over, and went back to sleep. Watch This House Has People in It. Our Crime Junkie podcast covered a story in which a man purchased an older home for his family. In the basement, there was a old drum. It weighed like 345 pounds or something, so he physically could not move it, and simply forgot about it. 9 years later, his point family is moving and selling the house. The prospective buyers absolutely do not want this old drum in the basement. The homeowner finally moves the old drum thanks to the help of his friend. Curiosity strikes and they decide to try to open it. They work the top off for what seems like an hour, and inside is another, smaller old drum. So they begin round 2, and this time, they discover a body of a 20-something-year-old Mexican woman from the 1960s. The body was left in a certain oil and conditions were just right, so the body remained perfectly intact for 40 years when the body was discovered. Did they ever figure out who it was or what happened? I didn't really think much of it at the time, but my friend's basement flooded during a sleepover. We noticed it happening and decided to wade through it, because this is totally better than a pool. We could have literally gotten shocked because her dad had all this mechanical and electrical equipment down there. Never mind the tetanus hazards. Our 9-year-old brains freaked out because the washer, dryer, or something around it was making horrible noises, and we ran out of there screaming and were admonished by her parents. Thinking back on it is even more creepy because Pennywise could have totally been lurking. Little boys in sparky flooded basements go pop pop pop. It could have been worse. The flooding could have seeped through the flooring and the hidden bodies under the floorboard could have come floating up. Cool, this totally went from story time to unolep. Lol, thank you for your contribution, Georgie. When I was about 4 I was playing hide and seek at my grandma's house with my siblings and cousins who were all considerably older. My brother was it, but I was helping him. I remember him carrying me down the stairs to the basement, where a side door led to a concrete food storage room. There were several rows of shelves filled with ancient peaches and also which formed dark aisles. My brother didn't turn on the light when we entered, so the only light came from the stairwell behind us. As we went to one of the aisles, I could see a form at the end. It was a thin, pale face with black pits for eyes. Long straight hair framed it, ring style. I began screaming and my brother, laughing, kept walking closer to it and forcing me to look. It was my half-Japanese cousin. The sight of her darkness-obscured face haunted my nightmares for a few years. We were lucky enough to see the basement of this library that used to be a post office. My mom used to work at that post office, and it was known that a ghost of a postal worker haunted the place. He killed himself, but we can only guess why. They wouldn't open the doors for us because of business reasons, but I swear to this day there was something tall standing in the corner, just going into this hallway inside the closed off room. It looked as if their arm swept behind the wall, just as I noticed it. They checked the security footage and didn't see anything. I just went back recently with an EMF reader. Everything was fine until the people at the front desk started talking about the post office guy haunting the place. That's when the EMF reader started to spike, even though I wasn't moving. There's a house I used to live in that I hated for many reasons, but the basement, where my room was, ironically really got eerie. There were 2 blind corners, one right after the other, at the bottom of the stairs, and 2 closets right there as well. One of the closets didn't bother me, but the first one you passed right at the bottom of the stairs. I swear, something evil was there, or happened there at some point in the past. I never saw anything, but I could feel it, and so could my kid brother. Probably just bad feng shui from the blind corners, but ugh, it did not help. I tended to go down there with the light off, because there was only one switch for the basement hall light, and it was at the top of the stairs. I had to go to the basement of an old friend's house to get something out of the fridge for him. He has another fridge in the basement. There's a room in the back of the basement where the boiler is. As I go to the fridge that's situated next to the boiler room, I can see from a few feet in front of me a white tall silhouette of what looked like a person standing in the darkness of the room. It looked like it had its arms spread out and was facing towards me. My fight or flight instincts kicked in, and I bolted back upstairs. I told him what I'd just seen and he laughs. We go back down together, and he hits the lights in the boiler room. It was just a long piece of cloth draped over rolled clothing lines with hangers. Not my story, but my mom was playing with her sister and decided to scare her. They had big rubber insects. My mom had a grasshopper and my aunt had a fly, but my mom could not remember what her sister had. So when she saw a giant spider, like paper plate sized, she went to grab it, but its leg moved. So of course my mom and my aunt freaked out. Did it give her a big rupee wallet? Sadly no, it just scared her to no extent. My so was sent to toss an old carpet from the garage by her parents. The carpet was very angry as it was a sleepy raccoon. Giant spider, like paper plate sized. What is Australia, Alex? When I was younger, we had a family friend who collected ancient Chinese artifacts antiques. They had a room in their finished basement where they kept all of the items on display. Their prized possession was some sort of gold burial shroud from a king or emperor supposedly. That room was always colder and creepier than the rest of the basement. You always felt like someone was behind you, a little too close, watching you from the corners. I always thought I saw shadow figures just at the edge of my peripheral vision. Should have tried sleeping in the room, or cutting your finger, and dripping blood on the objects in the room. Why bleeding on them? I don't know much about spiritual stuff. My former basement was home alone, working in rear area of semi-unfinished basement, where luggage plus travel stuff was stored. Had a creepy feeling as I shut off lights one by one when exiting. Just as I'm shutting door behind me and looking into the dark, I hear the distinct sound of a large zipper like a duffel bag suitcase zipping open or shut, like ZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZZz Just the guy who lives in your basement coming out of his hiding spot. Lol. When I was a kid, I once heard my dad screaming in the basement. Obviously this increased my heart rate, because hearing your dad screaming is kinda off-putting. Turns out it was a raccoon just chillin' in the basement. The raccoon sounded like your dad. Wow. The only thing crazier would be if the raccoon had human teeth. Was your dad in bed at the time? Are you sure he's not a raccoon? It's currently 1:32 am, and I'm in tears over you mistaking a raccoon for your dad. Go home with this girl and she's showing me around her place. On a shelf she shows off a large collection of jars with embalmed animal fetuses, mainly monkeys. She worked in a staff canteen and had no university degree in an associated field. I still have no idea why she had them or where she got them from. Frankly, I was too scared to ask. You can get preserved and taxidermist stuff off of Etsy. I would like to show you my Auschwitz fetus collection. Went to a friend's house after school. When we got there he went to my dad's home. We went in and down to the basement. Found his dad's body. He had shot himself in the head with a shotgun. This guy wins. Hey, everyone else, go home. This guy just won. Not me, but a close friend of mine found her mom at the bottom of the basement dead too. She apparently had a seizure while doing laundry and my friend found her when she got home from school. Tragic. My great aunt's basement is terrifying. The ceilings are low and it has a dirt floor. Her daughters painted Elmo on the wall and made handprints in red paint back in the 70s, and it's all chipped and peeling now like something out of a horror movie. One time when I slept overnight there, I went into the basement to scare myself. I got this really bad vibe, like a stomach churning, skin crawling feeling that I had to get out. I ran upstairs and hid in bed. I got called out on a job to clean out a hoarder's house. The basement looked like it was an insane asylum that a serial killer moved into. Animal skins hanging from the ceiling, old style sewing machines, newspapers covering up windows and clippings of certain people, glass jars filled with something, stacks of wet mattresses, old style bed frames, few rats, mold. If you don't mind saying so, what company do you work for? It's actually quite harmless, but my grandma shared a place with my uncle's family. They basically built a house with a small flat integrated on one side of the house. The basement was connected. Me, being like 5 years old, trying to find my cousin's TV room. We always played N64 back then. Opened the wrong door. It's really dark and all I see is like a pyramid of dolls. My grandma's puppet collection. I never noped out of a room that quickly. Cave crickets. They jump at you and have no mercy. I've never felt more like a wimp than when I screamed at a cricket. My aunt lived with my family briefly when I was 13, and we once spent 30 minutes fighting one off. It was awful. Aren't those things harmless though? They jump at you, but they can't really do anything. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're completely harmless, but it's not fun to randomly have insects jumping at you. Years ago when my family moved home, we had to clean the basement. The access was outside the building and the door was old and a bit broken first. The smell was just disgusting. After cleaning for a few hours, we eventually found dead cats, literally rotten and full of worms. Like they came there to die during winter cause it was a bit warmer than outside, or something. Scary is not the word to define the feeling, but that was definitely unexpected. My friend's mom owns lots of reptiles, and one time I went over to his house to sleep over and play Dungeons and Dragons, so he says that he set up a place for us to play in the basement. Right, so we go down and play for a while and 3 hours in I get really thirsty. I was talking a lot since I was the DM, so I go to get a drink from my friend's fridge, and like a quarter-gallon plastic bag of mice are in the fridge defrosting for the lizards. An old jar filled with liquid and the head of a monkey, preserved for a while. This was at my friend's place and he wasn't surprised by it, and merely told his maternal grandfather was an avid collector of weird things, but it was shocking to see a pair of eyes and a disembodied head look at you. Second would be finding out my aunt's cat's remains in one secluded spot in her basement. She thought they all ran away. Cats often hide before they die. It's very annoying.